Alexandria, a Hellenistic World Podcast. Episode 4, The Macedonians. It's 341 BCE. You stand in sweltering summer heat. You aren't used to this low elevation, this stifling air. Your feet ache from the long trek. Next, the woman who's organizing all this calls out again. Until now, you and your former neighbors have been an undifferentiated mass, guarded on all sides by men in that strange Greek-style armor, wielding giant spears. But the whole army has stopped outside some town, Lete they call it. Attached to the town like a leech is a forest of tents and spears, the camp of the army of the Macedonians. So now, this woman shouts in your language, a Thracian language, and without any protest, everyone complies. Beside you, your younger brother trembles forward. He nearly trips. You know his feet, like your own, are covered in blisters. You, the woman waits. The words are stuck on his lips right there. Come on, Bendidoros, you think. I'm a smith, he forces out. I was trained. I work metal, gold, and silver from the mines. My father was. Now he's choking up. The woman kicks at his shin. You know Greek? He straightens. Lie, you think. But again, he can't force anything out. He shakes his head. Another smith, the woman says, and pushes him along to the largest group, shambling in the shade of the city walls. To the mines you go, then. Your blood runs cold. Every muscle in your body wants to bolt forward, but you hold yourself back. Your brother never had such restraint. I am skilled, he protests. Please, I can work the metal. I don't have to be inside the mines. But at the woman's slightest glance, two armored men with those massive spears step forward. Your brother shuts up and swallows and shuffles over to the largest group. He gives you one last look. Why didn't you help me, Muka? You know it is the last time you will see him. Next, the woman's skin is paler than most, and not just because she seems to spend her time in palace halls. You can see from her gaze darting here and there that she has learned how to survive among these people. Now that gaze lands on you. And you, she says, who will you be? Her blue eyes pierce you. She's like you realize. She's not just fluent, she's Thracian, which means she can teach you how to survive here, which explains why your brother couldn't lie, why you can't lie. What can you do? But that's the problem. You don't have the art, the skills of a useful household slave. You can't weave, you can't work metal, you're no potter, you can't sing. You were supposed to be a priestess, devoted to Cottis, goddess of happiness, of celebration, leader of orgiastic rites. But these people, the ones who destroyed your home, do they even worship Cottis? They're Macedonian. You scramble, thinking, Dionysus, you force out. I was a priestess of Dionysus, god of happiness and celebration. I'm trained in his rites. A half lie. You hadn't yet finished your training. The woman's eyes narrow, but behind her piercing gaze, you swear you spot a glimmer, because she knows what you know. Without some skill, without some art, if all you offer is your working body, there are just two options for captive young women like you. You shudder at the thought. Hellenistes? She's asking if you speak Greek. You know a little, enough for a few rites for passers-by. But is it enough for her? Nai ma ton dia, you say. Yes, by the god. Fine, she says. You're in luck. They're always worshipping Dionysus here. Then she motions, and you take your place among a group of young women, daughters mostly of the noblemen of your clan, trained to entertain during their parties, trained for the symposium. You let yourself breathe. The shadows lengthen, the heat subsides a little. Your brother's group disappears, gone forever to Mount Pangaeon. There's nothing you can do. No one returns from the mines. Eventually, the woman motions again, and a messenger runs up. His legs are long and spindly, his chest broader than most. We're done here, she says, in Greek. He'll have his dancers. The messenger nods and runs off to camp. You recognize him. You remember. That messenger was the one who ran the auctions. He was there the day you were captured. It was the same day your home fell. They didn't even bother to wait. The Macedonians always do it that way, you heard, like all the other Greeks. The king and his army are followed by a train of camp followers, blacksmiths and prostitutes, and, above all, slave traders, swarming like dogs to scraps. Every city they capture, every enemy defeated, it's all sold and partitioned the very same day. Of course, many of the captives, you among them, aren't sold off. The day you lost your father on the walls of your home city, the day you were separated from your family forever, that messenger assigned you and your whole neighborhood to the royal spoils, the property of the king. The woman's shadow approaches, and you straighten up along with the rest of your line. You will be dancers and singers, she says. You will entertain, you will serve them wine. There is much to learn. The Macedonians have their preferences, their particularities. Understood? The girls nod weakly, weary from traveling further on foot than they ever had before. Understood? The woman repeated. Yes, a few croak out. The woman nods. Except you. Her gaze snaps to you. You with me. The rest follow behind. You do so, fighting the pain in your ankles. You will call me Phila, she says. You barely pause. Phila, you think. A Greek name. But she's moving quick. You catch up. You start. My name is Mukasokos. I don't care, she says. You'll have a Greek name soon enough, if you're lucky. If not, you'll be Thrata, another Thracian woman, or just girl. Try to avoid that. You don't want another name. Your name, Mukasokos, is a good one, daughter of the clan. But what you want stopped mattering when the walls of your hometown fell, when the men with long spears and Greek armor lit it all ablaze and carted off the gold and silver, the cattle and horses and people alike. But for now, you follow Phila toward the camp, to the tents of your new masters. the Macedonians. Darkness has enshrouded the world outside, but the city is alight with lamps and torches. You stand in the courtyard of some rich residence, just outside the door to the Andron, the banquet room. It's silent out here, a dozen slaves and servants all standing at attention as if backstage for a Greek play. It's so silent you can hear the carousing inside. They're speaking Greek, all right, but it's a heavy dialect. You can only understand bits and pieces. Even so, you get the sense that they're discussing some highbrow literature, some philosophical treatise, something about death and life after death and humans and titans and Dionysus. At your tired feet, there lays a mosaic with crashing waves and geometric patterns. But you can only catch glimpses, because at the name Dionysus you perk up. The woman, Phila, has dressed you in beautiful shiny robes that drag a little behind you, so you have to be careful when she gives you the signal to enter. You step from the crashing waves onto a different mosaic. It greets you as you enter, a depiction of some Greek hero slaying a lion, taming the wild. He's covered over by the largest mixing bowl you've ever seen. The bowl is solid bronze, flashing in the torchlight. You swear you can see the figures on it moving. And there are so many figures. Deer, a griffin, a stag. You'd recognize the scene depicted on it anywhere. There's young women, Maenads, dancing in a Bacchic frenzy, and at the center of it all is Dionysus himself. The young god rests his left leg on the lap of some noble-looking woman with an expensive veil. It's decidedly not Thracian handiwork. You're well familiar with the metallic arts of your homeland, rich in silver and gold mines. This must be Greek. And in Greek, you hear more clearly. No, you don't understand, one of the Macedonians, a young man, is saying. You think they disagree. I'm saying Heraclitus is right, yeah? He's explaining what Orpheus is saying. And so the Persians are right, because Heraclitus got his ideas from them, yeah? Quietly, you perform your role. You approach the beautiful bowl and mix the wine. Phila warned you about this. It's a thick substance, like the stuff your family drinks, or drank, but certainly thicker, less watered down than the southern Greeks would have it. You strain to get it mixed properly. You couldn't be more wrong, an older Macedonian man is saying. Heraclitus hated the Magi and hated the mysteries. What makes you think he'd agree with them? This second man is reclined, like almost all the rest, on one of the couches encircling the banquet room. Just based on the couches, you'd think it's egalitarian, circular. But all the men are clearly arranged looking to one person reclined at the head of the room, a man whose calm demeanor doesn't match the tension of the men around him. But the first Macedonian, he's younger and he's standing. He hated the impure mysteries, the first Macedonian answers. Do not the Persians believe that fire is the beginning of all things, the arche? And that is his view as well. Phila told you about him. He hasn't yet killed a wild boar, she said. And in his society, that means he can't yet recline at the banquets. Stay out of his sight, she said. he's still trying to prove himself. The second older man retorts, but you've lost track. You can hear the words, but you don't understand anything they're saying, and you don't care. Thank the goddess, they're too busy arguing. You are invisible to them. You finish your rites, you bless the wine in the name of the god, and you slip out just as the dancers come in. In the courtyard, the waves of the mosaic beneath you seem to churn. You brace yourself against the wall and hold steady. When you look up, that woman, Phila, has her silent gaze on you. All the dancers have gone in. All the servants are fetching more fancy food and wine. Just like that, she whispers to you in your language. Stay invisible. Follow my lead. They're always fighting like this, always competing, whether it's wrestling or philosophy. They're agonistic. It's right then, right when they're focused on each other, that we act. Understood? You will learn. I will learn, you think. You will learn their ways, their preferences, their customs. You will stay invisible, and you will learn how to survive under the Macedonians. In the morning, you find out why the army stopped here. All those noble Macedonians have filed out from the city, the stench of Dionysus all over them still, dragging their feet. That philosophical interlocutor from last night has a black eye. You had just been dismissed when that particular fight broke out, and Phila guided you away, told you to let the shouts and jeers of their fighting cover your exit. That's how it is with them, she said. Every symposium ends in an orgy, a fight, or both. Be happy it's that way. If they were like the southern Greeks, like the Athenians or Thebans, their wine would be watered down, their manners more contained. You wouldn't be able to stay invisible. Now those hungover Macedonians have lined up and you follow in the solemn rites. You are one of many slaves carrying goods one at a time, gold wreaths and silver jewelry, gleaming swords, elaborate armor, scroll after scroll of philosophical treatises, or, in your case, wine. In perfect procession, you bear the heavy jar past soldier after soldier, citizen after citizen, a great crowd gathered and facing your destination. You ignore your aching ankles, fighting to stay in perfect form, because one misstep now during this most important ceremony would be your last. You bear the jar all the way to a massive stack of firewood, and suddenly you are face to face with that man from last night, the man around whom the whole symposium had revolved, on whom this whole ceremony hinged, by whom your entire homeland was sacked and enslaved. You hadn't gotten a good look last night, focused as you were on staying invisible. But here? Oh, gods. Oh, Kotis, protect me, you think, because you are the most visible you've ever been. Here, at the end of the procession, with the whole crowd gathered behind, you look up and barely hold a gasp. You hadn't seen last night. This man has only one eye, the other an empty pit. His one-eyed gaze seems to pierce past you at the crowd behind. He asks something in Greek, but he's got that heavy accent you would never understand if Phila hadn't told you ahead of time. He's asking if this wine is sacred for the god. And you your heart pounding, stand before the king of the Macedonians, and you say, Nai matondia. And he nods. His gaze still looks through you as if you're not even there, and that is how you need it to be. With measured steps, you walk past him and set the wine jar with all the other goods, weapons and armor and perfume flasks, and this close you glimpse on the pyre the body itself. You see, covering the corpse's legs and arms and face, gold sheets stamped with floral patterns, already flashing as if on fire. You feel yourself tense. It's too familiar, you realize. All funeral goods, the same as those of the elites buried in your homeland. You speed off away from all this, lined up in safety among the other slaves. At the end of the line, Phila gives you a little nod. And now, you just watch as the young man from the night prior approaches and gives some speech. His father was a warrior, he's saying, a companion of the king himself, and he died bravely fighting the barbaric Thracians. He is honored that the king, as head priest of all Macedonians, is present to lead the funeral. Finally, the young man lights the pyre. Many of the goods have already been moved into the massive tomb, but the papyrus scrolls, the gold sheets and wreath, the armor the corpse is wearing, that's all burned, melted, it's all fuel. The dead man, the cavalry companion of the king, will take those things with him. And as the fire crescendos, as the wailing from the gathered crowd reaches its peak, you too feel your eyes welling up. You are mourning with them, but not for this man. No, you are mourning those people this man helped to kill and enslave, your kin. The slaves to your left and right, some are Thracian like you, but the rest are from who knows where, a random mix by design. You mourn now your family, the community you grew up with, your brother, probably right now force marching to the mines of Pangaeon. You mourn them, and you decide you will do whatever it takes. You will become invisible. You will serve the very men who killed your family. You will survive to honor and mourn those you've lost. You will learn to thrive among the Macedonians. Welcome again, friends, to Alexandria, a Hellenistic World podcast. You just met some of the Macedonians through the eyes of an outsider, a young Thracian woman named Mukasokos, or Muka for short. Muka is from Thrace, in particular a tribe called the Besoi, who protected the lands surrounding the ancient Evros River in what is now southwestern Bulgaria. In about 342 or 341 BCE, the king of Macedon, Philip II, invaded Thrace, and in one of those invasions, he took a fortress city and refounded it in his own name, Philippopolis, modern Plovdiv. Our friend Muka was captured and enslaved in one of those raids, and she now finds herself at the mercy of her new masters, the Macedonians, and in a new land, Macedon. The land of ancient Macedon has been described as a middle ground, a place between. The kingdom is wedged between the Greek peninsula to its south, a peninsula dominated by the hot, dry Mediterranean climate, and to its north, the Balkan Mountains, with its abundant forests and metal dominated by a mainland European climate, cold and wet. To the east is the coast of the Aegean, to the west, more European cold mountains. This is a land of steep valleys and high peaks, home to shepherds and hardy folk, surrounding the fertile plain at its center, the plain that forms the grain-rich heart of the Macedonian kingdom. Above all, this is a land of abundant resources coveted by its neighbors. And these neighbors, in turn, influenced the Macedonians from their earliest times. So let's go through some of those influences. Our friend Muka has already seen how the Macedonians are, in some ways, completely foreign to her, because in many ways, they're Greek. All the evidence we have today suggests their language was a very distinct dialect of Northwestern Greek, difficult but not impossible for other Greek speakers to understand. And likewise, the Macedonian Symposium was like the Southern Greek Symposia, but it's also different. Athenian writers of our time period, the 4th century BCE, stereotype Macedonian symposia as violent, drinking their thick wine and inevitably getting into physical fights or orgies or both. To the Southern Greeks, the Macedonians are almost archaic, frozen in time, like the kingdoms described in Homer's Iliad or by the poet Hesiod. They're not quite barbarian, but they're not proper Greeks either. In fact, they're an underappreciated bulwark, often absorbing or repelling constant invasions from the north by the Thracians and the Illyrians and the tribes of the Balkan Mountains. But the southern Greeks, despite their distaste, had to work with the local Macedonians because the land of Macedon was their best source of timber and metals. Polis, that's city-states like Athens, needed Macedonian timber to build their ships, and they needed the silver and gold of Macedon and its neighboring region, Thrace, to mint coins and pay for their wars. And the Macedonian elites, for their part, they loved aspects of southern Greek culture. For one, they enjoyed Greek art. The kings of Macedon were ardent patrons of famous Greek painters and sculptors and playwrights. The old king Archelaus, who had ruled from 413 to 399 BCE, patronized numerous Greek artists, including the famous Athenian playwright Euripides. It was in Macedon, not in Athens, that Euripides wrote some of his most famous plays, like The Bacchae, a tragedy all about the god Dionysus. Which brings us to the gods. The Macedonians worshipped many of the same Greek gods. In Macedonia, we find cults of Hera and Heracles, Aphrodite and Apollo, and, as we saw last episode, also local Greek-style deities like the nymphs and river gods. But the Macedonians, they're eclectic. They also worshipped Artemis of Ephesus, a syncretic goddess combining Greek and Anatolian traits. They worshipped the Anatolian goddess Cybele, and at a temple in Calathea on the Chalkidiki Peninsula, they even worshipped Zeus Ammon, the Greek version of the Egyptian sun god Amun-Ra. Most importantly for our friend Muka, the Macedonians worshipped Dionysus, the god of wine and revelry, and they worshipped him in a special way. They worshipped him as part of the Dionysian mysteries. The mysteries of Dionysus are mysterious because ancient Greek mystery cults were by definition secretive and restricted only to the highest initiates. From what we can tell, the Dionysian mysteries were focused on wine, on ecstatic dancing, and above all, on death and rebirth. This wasn't just an excuse to party. The Greeks and Macedonians took these rites seriously as a way to directly connect with their god. In Macedon, however, Dionysian cult was also related to another deity, the singer Orpheus. At Derveni, near the ancient city of Lete, modern archaeologists uncovered some tombs. Inside those tombs were countless beautiful grave goods, like those described by our friend Muka, including the famous Derveni papyrus. This papyrus is the oldest known manuscript ever found in Europe, surviving because it was placed on the dead noble's funeral pyre and carbonized. The Derveni papyrus was written sometime around 340 BCE, so right around our story with Muka in 341. And it's a philosophical treatise all about Orphic poems, poems related to the birth of the gods and the creation of mankind. This papyrus is some of our best evidence for the religions and philosophies of the Macedonian elite. But to hear more about that, you'll just have to tune in to this episode's B-side. Anyways, inside that same complex of tombs, archaeologists also found another famous artifact, the Derveni crater, a massive bronze mixing bowl depicting the god Dionysus and his Maenads. The Greeks believed that Dionysian worship came to them from the northeast, from Thrace. Of course, that's not entirely true. We know from archaeology that Dionysus was worshipped by the Mycenaeans way back in the Bronze Age. But the belief that Dionysian worship came from Thrace speaks to a broader truth. For all their Greek influence, the Macedonians were influenced equally by their other neighbors, including the Thracians. Now, here's the problem with both the Thracians and the Macedonians. Both of these groups were in fact composed of numerous smaller tribes and clans. We already saw with our friend Muka the tribe of the Bessoi, but in Thrace there were also the Satrai, the Dioi, Bastones, and countless others, including, most importantly, the Odrysians, who, like the Macedonians, formed a conglomerate kingdom throughout the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, covering what is roughly now Bulgaria. Thrace and Macedon both shared similar resources, wood and metals and abundant pasture land for grazing herds. And they shared many funerary customs, where elite men were buried with lavish goods, sheet gold and jewelry, and weapons and armor. In short, among the poleis of southern Greece and the Aegean Sea, wealth was funneled into public temples to the gods, through which elite wealth was distributed in the form of sacrifices and dedications to the broader citizen body. In Macedon and Thrace, meanwhile, wealth was funneled into private tombs, ensuring that these elites were granted a bountiful afterlife, and, from the perspective of the southern Greeks, recalling the kings of Homeric times. But the Thracians and the Macedonians were also both influenced by another culture, a culture which we will get to know more and more soon enough. They were influenced by the Persians. It all started with the Persian king Darius the Great in the late 500s BCE. Way back then, the great king was extending his influence into Europe, and he sent one of his generals to demand obeisance from the Macedonian king. This king, Amyntas I of Macedon, ruled from roughly the early 540s to about 498 BCE. And honestly, we really don't know much about the Macedonian kingdom before him. But this king Amyntas was convinced, and for about 40 years, Macedon was a direct vassal of the Achaemenid Empire. Royal Persian inscriptions referred to their Macedonian vassals bearing tribute to the great king as Yauna Takabara, Greeks with hats that look like shields. Macedonians fought on the Persian side in the Persian army during their invasions of Greece. After the Greeks won at Salamis in 480 BCE, the king of Macedon, a man named Alexander I, went to Athens and himself offered to broker an alliance between the Greeks and the Persians. Of course, famously, the Greeks rejected this offer, and instead Alexander I and his Macedonians fought alongside the Persian army at Plataea in 479 BCE and lost. But although the Persians were driven out of mainland Greece and back into Asia Minor, that was far from the end of relations between the Achaemenid Persians and the Macedonians. The Macedonian kings learned a lot from the Persians. Scholars have compared many grave goods and many aspects of Macedonian kingship, such as the organization of the royal court and the institution of the royal pages, those paides basilikoi, with Persian practices. Early in the reign of our king, Philip II, though, things changed. Under King Philip, Macedonia became a safe haven for the rebellious nobles and enemies of the great Persian king. So, for instance, when a satrap, a governor of northwestern Asia Minor named Artabazos, rebelled against Persia and was subsequently defeated, he and his general Memnon fled to the Macedonians. For 10 years, from 352 to 342, the former satrap Artabazos stayed at the palace in Pella, although his general Memnon went back into Persian service a little earlier. And Artabazos is just one example. There was also Sisinnes and Amenopes, both Persian nobles who fled to the King Philip and later joined Alexander in his invasion of their homeland. No doubt, the great king of Persia wasn't too happy with all these rebels fleeing to Macedon, but for the Macedonians, these political refugees were opportunities to learn as much as they possibly could about the inner workings of the Persian Empire. Another Persian influence we'll see soon through the eyes of our friend Muka is the royal hunt. Like the Persians, the elites of Macedon, and above all their king, were expected to lead great hunts of dangerous animals like wild boar and lions. At ancient Aigai, archaeologists have uncovered tombs which, among many other finds, include beautifully preserved paintings with scenes of such royal hunts. Now, we'll return to those tombs in a future episode, but for now, just note that these royal hunts were so important that Macedonian nobles depicted them in their final resting place. So, the Macedonians were a mishmash, a hodgepodge of native, Greek, Thracian, and Persian influences, not to mention influences from their other Balkan neighbors, like the Illyrians, the Epirotes, or the Paeonians. But you may have noticed that many of the customs and ideas I've mentioned so far are focused on the elites, the nobles of the Macedonians. Our evidence for the regular people of ancient Macedonia is not nearly so definite. Many were shepherds, others farmers, still others woodcutters. Did they consider themselves Macedonian, or merely members of their local clans or villages subject to the Macedonian king at Pella? We just don't know. We do know they spoke that weird northwestern dialect of Greek, because one thing the regular Macedonian folk left behind was curse tablets. Both at Pella and at Pydna, another important Macedonian city, archaeologists have found curse tablets buried in graves. Some of these tablets have to do with lawsuits containing lists of names of enemy litigants with the goal of binding their tongues, preventing them from speaking against the tablet's author. Other tablets are erotic spells, sometimes called love spells, Though, as we'll see, some of these so-called love spells verge more on mind control. These sorts of curse tablets and ancient magic in general are solid evidence that regular Macedonian folk were participating in the same broad religious beliefs as the Greeks to their south. For now, then, keep all of these traits in mind, their various influences, their own homegrown ideas and philosophies, their religion and art, as we return to our friend Muka. The seasons have changed. Harsh summer heat has given way, and you are relishing in the cool fall breeze from the hilltop. Behind you lies that grand palace Pella at the head of the bulky square city. Ships bob in the breeze like a forest of their own, all along the glittering harbor bearing timber and metals toward the Aegean Sea, off in the thousand directions of the king's interests. The palace and city are encircled by carefully managed fields, golden grain and barley, lentils and peas. Further afield are the olive vineyards, and close by, the reason for you standing on this hilltop. Below you, stretching along the contours of the slope, are vineyards heavy with grapes sacred to Dionysus. 100 sweating slaves and laborers, given shade only by their flat, shield-shaped calcea hats, slowly but surely harvest the god's fruit. But you are distracted, because while the palace lays behind you, before you rise the northern slopes, where vineyards give way to wide pastures and deep forest. You can see, even from here, the oak and ash of the lower lands give way to the dense wild pine and firs of the mountains. The last of the northerly winds bring the cold of those slopes down here to you, and though it's nice enough down here, you can't help but imagine how it must feel on those forested slopes. Even from here, it looks just like... Don't. Phila appears beside you, her blue eyes already narrowed. Stop, Betty. She calls you by your new name. Betty, for your former clan, the Bessoi, like a southern Greek would pronounce it. The name bothered you at first, but you've come to love it. Your old name was Mukasokos, daughter of the clan. Now your name is your clan. You are your clan. Sorry, you say. I know the hunts are distracting, Phila says. She's speaking Greek like always these days. But you have to focus. The hunt? You ask, and only then notice. In those forests and fields, appearing here and there between the tree line, you can barely see the glint of Macedonian swords and spears. But as soon as you see them, they've spotted some wild animal, a boar or deer or something, and off they disappear into the trees. You remember that the forest here is nothing like home, because that forest slope is kingly domain, reserved for the royal hunts, like the paradise nature preserves of the Persians. Only further afield can you spot actual shepherds, flocks of sheep and goats roaming the slopes. And you wonder, what do those shepherds so far off think of their supposed king? Do they love him like the nobles here in Pella seem to? Do they also drink thick wine? Do they also cite obscure Greek philosophy? Are they, too, Macedonian? Phila coughs. Right, focus. She has brought you here to supervise the rites, to ensure that the royal vineyards are properly blessed. Dionysiphon will be here soon, Phila says. Make sure you've done your part before then, yeah? Dionysiphon. He's all she talks about these days. An appropriate name for a man given oversight of the king's viticultural property. He's some young Macedonian promising Phila that he'll buy her and buy her freedom and marry her someday. What happened to staying invisible, you wonder? But things seem to be working out for Phila. And when Phila does well, she helps you do well too. Sure, she's mellowed a bit these past few weeks, but she's also Macedonianized, even more than before. She speaks her Greek with that thick Macedonian accent. She wears her hair in that Greek style, with that wide hairband holding it together like a slingshot. Her commands are gentler, her walk a little slower. She even smiles. You just hope it lasts. It's the deepest night when you feel strong hands jolt you awake. You nearly scream. Is this your nightmare realized? You had tried so hard to stay invisible, but had some Macedonian noble seen you, had taken notice, and now he snuck in, grabbing at your wrists. But then you open your eyes, and you see those strong hands belong to a woman with startling blue eyes, wet and glistening. Phila? You mouth, careful not to wake the other slaves. But she simply grabs your hand and drags you outside, down the dark halls and out onto the streets. The night air is brittle. You're out of breath by the time she drags you beyond the city gate. Just outside the walls stand countless statues, gravestones, inscribed columns, and when she lets go of your hand, you grasp the closest stable stele you can find. Phila, you gasp. What? Why? At this time of night? She finally stops and turns. In the moonlight, her drab robes and the bright painted statues have all flattened to gray. She carries something gray too in her other hand. A scroll, you realize. A scroll made of lead. A curse. Alone among the gray, her eyes shine, glistening silver like the metals of your home. The Macedonians love to lie, she says. Remember that. Their king lies and he takes cities for it. Their aristocrats lie and they get lands and titles. Dionysiphon lies and he gets... She turns away. You want to scold her, to tell her, of course, that man lied. What made you think he would ever see you as anything other than property of the king? But you hold back, because you remember that day, seasons ago, when you were at her mercy, when you could have been sent with your brother to certain death or worse. You say, I will help you. You know what she wants. These are Greek rites, but in your time here, you've seen the magicians at work, already heard the swirling rumors whenever a noble would suddenly take sick, or whenever a marriage was suddenly canceled. And you have more than enough experience with the dead. You join her at a grave hidden on all sides by high pillars and statues. Macron, Phila reads from the inscription. And together you dig. You dig until before you is unveiled in the gray moonlight the gnarled white of bone. Phila has unfurled the lead scroll. Keep watch, she orders, so you hide at the entrance of this maze of grave monuments. But you are close enough to hear what she says. Of the Thema and Dionysiphon, she says. The ritual wedding and the marriage I bind by a written spell, as well as that of all other women to him, both widows and maidens, but above all of the Thema. And I entrust this spell to Macron and to the Daimones. And were I ever to unfold and read these words again after digging it up, only then should Dionysiphon marry, not before. May he indeed not take another woman than myself, and let me alone grow old by the side of Dionysiphon, and no one else. I implore you, have pity for Phila, dear Daimones, for I am bereft of all my dear ones and abandoned. But please keep this writing for my sake, so that these events do not happen, and wretched Thema perishes miserably. But let me become happy and blessed. Summer heat has returned, and Phila, in a way, has gotten her wish. You are cleaning up in one of the many androi, the banquet halls, from the symposia the night prior. The courtyard is lit, the diffuse pink of sunrise streaming from the east, the direction of your home. You hear footsteps echoing in the hall outside. That's nothing new. There are always countless messengers and heralds and slaves running back and forth. But these footsteps are all too familiar and strange to hear this time of morning. Phila's shadow blocks the pink light, and you stand at attention. You need me, you ask in Greek. But Phila replies in your old tongue. The campaign's starting early this year. You feel yourself ease. Oh, so the wedding. But Phila shakes her head. No, well, yes, but that's not... She trails off. He's going east again. They're going back to Thrace. Just as soon, you tense. You imagine Phila back again at the head of a great line, all those people enslaved and scattered across the lands of the Macedonians. But Phila's blue eyes pierce you. The king is leaving his son here as regent. He'll be in charge, which means there will still be symposia to serve. You start, which means you can stay here, she says. Do what you're doing now, or you can come and see the forests again. I get to choose? You ask. It's my choice. I'm asking your preference. Phila shifts now, returning to the threshold and blocking the light. Tell me by sundown. You nod, and Phila leaves. But when the pink light returns behind her shadow, you spot a glimmer in the cracks between mosaic tiles. You bend over and pick up a little piece of metal. It's a silver coin struck on one side with the bearded face of the god Zeus, and on the other with a horse-drawn chariot galloping east. You feel the coin, the ridges and the valleys of the divine face. It's brand new, probably dropped on accident by the king himself. And you think, did your brother mine the silver that became this coin? Did he perhaps convince them, after all, to let him work in the smithy? Was this coin struck by his hands? Or has he already died, like everyone else sent there, starved and overworked? Were his last thoughts of home? You drop the coin and sweep it away with the rest of the trash. You have no use for it yourself. You have already made your decision. You can't bear to see your homeland again. You can't bear to see more people enslaved, to take part in that process. Phila has her reasons, but you will stay here. You will serve the symposia of the young prince just recently returned from his studies under those Greek philosophers. You will stay here among the Macedonians. Thank you for listening to Alexandria, a Hellenistic World podcast. I am always open to feedback or suggestions, so please leave a rating or review on your podcast app of choice. If you want to talk directly, you can find me on Twitter at Alexandria_pod, on Instagram as Alexandria.pod, or on Blue Sky and YouTube as simply at AlexandriaPod. You can find bibliography, more contact info, and other goodies on my website, alexandriapod.wordpress.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in Alexandria.